Kieran, hi, how you going?
Good. How are you?
Oh man, really good. Really excited to have you on this. Let's call it enhanced Stemiverse episode where we could video as well as audio. Doing a little trial here. I want to see what it's like to actually see the guests that I'm talking to, as well as hear them. So how have you been?
Yeah, really good. Really good. Really busy. Lots going on with Rana Park, with RocketShoes, my startup, and with the Nem blockchain as well. So we can get into all of that.
Yeah. I get the feeling that you've been very busy since the last time we spoke. I think last time we spoke, it must have been about maybe last year. I remember the Bitcoin back then was close to $20,000
Yeah.
Australian for
Actually,
one Bitcoin.
let's see what it is today. It is today. Wow, we're under 5,000, so
Yeah,
4,000.
there you go. So it's a whole different story. But we're not here to talk about Bitcoin and currencies. Definitely, we're going to talk about blockchain.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of developments in that area, and in particular, blockchain and education. You've been making things on the blockchain, haven't you?
Yeah. So we're doing there's multifaceted, I suppose. So I've got students learning about the tech in the school, and doing a lot with actually Dogecoin, because Dogecoin is like a joke cryptocurrency that actually has a value, but it doesn't matter if the kids lose it. So
So that's Dogecoin.
Dogecoin, yeah,
How do you spell that? So
yeah, it's either Doge or Doggy. So Doge coin. So if you go to dogechain.info, I can share the screen if you want.
yeah.
So it looks like this. Can you see that?
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, this gives you an overview of what's happening with the Doge blockchain. There's a little mascot down the corner here.
Oh, hold on a second. Hold on. I rushed into things. First, we need to know who you
Yeah.
are. So give us a quick, bio of yourself.
Yeah, so I'm an educational technologist working at Rana Park Primary School in Melbourne. Um, this school's kind of at the forefront of pedagogy and technology and how those sort of intertwine. And we get a lot of visitors to the school pretty much on a daily basis to see what's happening. We just had a current affair out the other day actually to a story on the school. So that's either going up next week or next year. So we're not too sure. They're definitely going to let us know.
Takes a while.
I've got my own startup, so I'm a co-founder for a company called RocketShoes, which is, I think the best way to think of it is like a headless LMS that's built on something called IPFS and the blockchain. And I'm running what's called consensus of content, which is essentially, I won't say just students, because teachers as well, but learners being able to vote on what they want to learn using the blockchain tech in an authenticated manner. So yeah, that's multiple.
Is that all? Okay, not your typical school. I'd say you guys are like I don't know, space age technology school, and
Yeah,
now half of what you said doesn't make sense at this point, but we're going to dig into it and break it down into simple language so that I can understand what you're talking about.
sure.
So recently, I should also mention, because it's quite relevant, I did another interview with Mark Roper, who, funny enough, was one of my students in one of my last years at university when I was a lecturer, and he is a founder of a blockchain and mining, Bitcoin-like mining or cryptocurrency mining company. And in that episode, which hasn't gone live at this point in time, it will be published in the next couple of weeks. We're talking about how the blockchain can help save the world, among other things that we discussed. So in a way today with you, Kieran, we're going to talk about how the blockchain can help save education, right? or maybe bring education into the 21st century.
100%.
So maybe I think just before we begin with the actual part of the interview, before I hit record, we're talking about some really earth-moving developments in the Australian tech sector that have to do with government and government regulations. And I thought, wow, this is very significant because it does affect a lot of us. And Australia does have a significant tech sector. So can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so the other night, basically there's a new bill passed that's called the Assistance and Access Bill, which is essentially making encryption obsolete within Australia. So it's pretty much, I think, like unbeknownst to the politicians that have passed it, it's pretty much the most draconian thing that's happened in any country ever, and it's happened here. So basically what it means is any tech company that has any form of encryption, so think of Microsoft has a big presence here, Amazon, anyone you can think of, basically.
But what about smaller companies, like hypothetically speaking, like me, hypothetically, I might be interested in protecting my company data by encrypting it, since I'm storing my files on the cloud, so that I work with my team. But let's say, I'm not really that I am, but let's say that I am encrypting all of these files. Does that bill affect me as well?
Yes, so basically what it means is if you're a developer, and really that's our main export in Australia now, is really good developers. We make good tech. And with this bill, it's essentially killed that. But basically what it means is that anyone who's working for, say, your company or for Microsoft or for, pick whoever you want, they have to adhere to, say feds come in and say, we want access to such and such person, but you can't tell your boss that we have access and we want backdoors into the software, so compromised software, legally compromised software. And essentially that means you're no longer able to trust any software that's developed in Australia from now and forever until they get rid of this bill. So it essentially means that any tech company or any developer, more to the point, is going to go overseas. So we're going to lose everything in Australia that's been built, and it affects me directly, and it affects what I'm really passionate about, which is RocketShoes. And we're essentially what RocketShoes is, and I can go into detail on it, but kind of think of it as a headless LMS where you have the data layer. So instead of your data as a student going from here all the way to servers over in California and then all the way back every time you want to use something, that's how the cloud works. It's flipped over. So using IPFS, the data belongs to the student and not to a third party. Now to do that, you need certain types of encryption so that you can be more efficient. So instead of the data going overseas, it gets broken into little pieces, put onto devices that are close by, and then you retrieve that in a much more efficient manner. Now with this bill, that's going to basically mean that this is the worst country in the world to develop something like that.
What about North Korea?
Yeah, not as bad as here.
No.
Well, it's legit.
What record?
I don't think North Korea, now they probably do, they have backdoors and everything, but they haven't put anything into writing like this.
They just do it as dictators.
Yeah.
No, it's legislators, so okay, at least we are by the law.
Yeah, I suppose it's pretty amazing, but it's essentially like if you think of Lifehacker had a really good article. I'll share the screen just so you can see.
Yeah, sure.
And
so Lifehacker is like an online magazine, right? That people go and exchange views on news or exchange news themselves.
That's right. Basically, they go in depth, but there was one part that really kind of made sense.
Some interesting comments flashing by.
There's a million. If you go on Twitter, it's crazy.
Sad day for democracy.
Yeah, anyway. These guys break it down. You can go and have a look at it yourself. But basically, they go into in part of the article. Say you're a developer here, or looking to come to a country that is really good at developing technology. you can no longer come here because one, you can't trust the stuff that's been developed here, but two, you could be either fired, or if you don't follow what the legislation says, you could be sort of against the law. So it's lose-lose, like nobody wins.
It's worth having a look at the details of this legislation, because it does seem very alien to me, like seriously alien in a country like Australia, to actually legislate to have an employee of a company being essentially forced to withhold information from the at least direct supervisors,
That's right,
the directors of the company, and to be forced by the government to essentially lie and do things such as insert backdoors into the software that they're designing as developers, like with the trust of the company and the company's leadership, and be forced to essentially compromise the product that the company is paying them to make. So I'm going to spend a bit of time to have a look at this later and look at the source of this new bill and see how it's written. I think that the details make a difference and they matter. Just to take this back to RocketShoes, I'd like to first of all talk a little bit about the motivation that you had to go into development of this new software. So it is an LMS. So I guess our listeners understand what an LMS is. It's our learning management system, like something like Blackboard they may be familiar with, right? Or LearnDash, things like that.
Yeah.
You can put on your courseware on it, and the students can consume it in the classroom, at home, etc. What was wrong with those more traditional existing solutions that prompted you to go and develop RocketShoes?
Well, it's not really in direct competition with that. It's with LMSs. So it's if you think of it like a headless LMS, so meaning you can plug it into any existing LMS. So it makes it more efficient. But we're developing that, and we're developing an app for Verona Park first. So Verona Park will be the first school to use it. And it essentially means that Verona Park is going to be the first school in the world where students own their own data. It's never happened before, which is really exciting. So basically this came about, it's kind of been a bit of a personal journey as well as...
sorry, Kieran, just to clarify here. So currently, if you use an LMS like Blackboard, for example, instructors, teachers, students' data live in the data center where the application is running.
Yep.
So essentially, if your application is running, say, in North Korea, then the government there, whoever is in power, can directly access your data with no problem. There's legislation about that in the US. So if, say, the FBI has got suspicion to believe that there is some evidence in a particular case working on in the data center where your stuff is also stored, they have the right to access it. And the same thing happens in Australia and many parts of the world. What you're saying is that there is value in a person owning the data that they produce, the work, and that they need.
Definitely,
right?
definitely. I
that
think
goes to education.
It kind of goes beyond that. So if you think of at the moment, like I would say the number one tool that students use is YouTube. We kind of talked about it just before.
Yeah.
But not just for learning, but also for creating. They create a lot of content, put it on YouTube, and that's really cool. Except for any content you create belongs to Google. So we've had students in the past do their Enigma missions in the school, and we had one girl do I think it was GMO foods, and did her Enigma mission on that. Put up the video. And yeah, the Google, because the politics obviously didn't align with whatever Google's is or are,
policies, yeah,
they can delete your content, and that's what they did, and that's happened to a lot of kids, and that's not really fair. Just because they have a good service, it doesn't mean that they should control what students get to say. Same thing happened for me at EduTech, actually. This is even crazier. Doing a live stream of my presentation. I showed a 1-minute clip of me on SBS. Obviously the Google AI saw it and went, no, that doesn't belong to you. Killed my stream. And The
automatically.
only, sorry?
That happened automatically, right? No human intervention.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
AI decided
Just
the
saw it
video
and
could
went,
go down.
no, you don't belong to you. It's like, okay, what?
Mm.
But the only people that got to see that live stream before they killed it was two podcasters actually from the States. These two kids that interviewed myself and my co-founder Matt Riddle, and they had a podcast called School Sucks, which is really cool.
Gotta check that out.
They watched it live and then it died. So if I was live streaming on something like RocketShoes or IPFS, then that data has belonged to me. It's not belonged to some third party, and
Right.
it's not beholden to an artificial intelligence telling me that my video doesn't belong to me. It's crazy. So there's that aspect of it, which is really important. But there's also just in terms of a learning management system, you could think of something like Google Classroom. It's pretty good. A lot of people use it. But again, data's all going off to servers in California. It doesn't belong to you.
So where is the data actually stored?
Data centers usually. So when you hear a cloud, just think of a bunch of computers overseas that they can look through.
This traditional model. But what about in RocketShoes? If you use RocketShoes,
the RocketShoes is built off IPFS. So IPFS stands for the Interplanetary File System. So it's a new protocol. And it sounds crazy, but and that's kind of where the RocketShoes name came from, because put your rocket shoes on and away you go. But it's looking at the inefficiencies of HTTP. So if you ever go to a website, you usually see HTTP at the front of it. That's a protocol it's been pretty good up till now, where you usually see the S on the end. That stands for SSL certificate, so it's encryption. So that's illegal now, apparently, in Australia.
It's encrypted. Yeah, backdoor, please.
But basically, they're on centralized servers. So anytime that you go to a website and you refresh it, or go to a video on YouTube and refresh it, downloading that whole thing from that central server every time. What IPFS does is it's akin to torrents. If you've ever used a torrent before to download a movie or something, or for legitimate reasons like downloading Linux or something like that. Basically, it splits up the file into little pieces and puts it in nodes and in devices sort of closest to you, and it brings it back as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And what that means is you're not creating all this excess data. So if you think about, say this video we did now, and so we made a 1 megabyte clip out of this video and it went viral. So we did something silly now and it went completely viral and millions of people watched it. Put it up on YouTube, that 1 megabyte clip creates petabytes of data every time people bring it down. So it's highly inefficient. IPFS solves that. So it actually, the more people that watch it, the more efficient it gets and the faster the content's delivered. So efficiency is one aspect of it, but then there's also the ownership side of it. So you can prove, and this is where the blockchain comes in as well. So we're building RocketShoes off IPFS and the Nem blockchain. The blockchain allows us to do timestamping. So you can prove 100% because it's a trustless network. So it means trustless means you can trust it because there's no human intervention. It's a network of computers that all come to consensus. And basically the blockchain says, yes, you did this at this time. It's 100% you. And then IPFS is the storage layer for that. So it's two-factor, but it's really cool because it means that now that the students who are working at Warana or working on projects at Warana can put that content there, and then 20 years down the track, they can get that data back. There's no other system like that.
Kieran, just to confirm that I understand right, what IPFS can do, especially for content creators, right? Because it will assist everybody. I can see here that IPFS is a distributed web. Its mission is to make the web faster, safer, more open, which is definitely going to be a good thing for everyone. But on top of that, if you are a content creator, what IPFS does is, like, when I upload a video, for example, a new lecture, a new PDF document, the network will automatically know that this new document belongs to me, or at least I was the first person to upload it. And that information is stored in the network itself. And therefore I can prove my copyright.
That's right.
Am I thinking the right way?
Yep, 100%.
That is extremely important, because like, how many times have I had to go to Google and complain that somebody had copied one of my videos, breaching copyright laws pretty much everywhere, but I had to prove to Google with documentation that I am the legitimate creator of that content. But if I understand right, with IPFS, I'm not going to have to do that, because the network itself will know that I was the originator.
That's right, exactly right. And it allows for things like, there's actually, we might have talked about it last time, I can't remember, but off the Steam blockchain, STE, there's a thing called D-Sound, and you can actually upload podcasts, so audio content, to IPFS, and it gets hashed on the Steam blockchain. And then through that, content creators actually get paid in cryptocurrency for their content, but they have 100% ownership over it. So yeah, there's no disputing when you create something, it's 100% yours, and the network agrees, and everybody agrees that basically, because you can hash down to the atomic level, meaning that you can have content that's 100% yours. Hey, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, so it's super exciting stuff. It's really gonna, well, it is gonna change everything. And I mean, there's a bunch of competitors. Storage is one I probably talked about last time, that are decentralized and allow for content to be 100% owned. But I think this is, out of all of them, is the most efficient. And if you get time, watch read the white paper. It's really interesting. But basically, so we're taking that, but building on top of it. And we're actually, speaking of Google, for Rhino Park, we're using Google SSO, so single sign-on. So kids can just click, boom, they're in through an app. So we're developing for touch first purposely. So they click into their wallet, so they have a learning wallet, and then all their files that are in there are there for the next 1,000 years. And the really cool thing, and this is why it's kind of a personal journey, is because we've, like I mentioned, the kids doing Enigma machines. We were using an LMS at one point that was kind of cool, that the kids all liked, but they jacked their prices up and our school couldn't afford it anymore. So they kind of picked up shop and ran off with all the kids' data. So the cool thing with this now is, even if RocketShoes disappears tomorrow, your data's there forever on IPFS and no one can take it away from you. So it has real implications for education in particular, because it means now, say you have a daughter in prep and she's done some amazing artwork. We probably all did amazing artwork in prep, and then it kind of disappears and you never see it again. But that artwork, she can get 20, 40 years later and use it, like in her job or whatever she wants to do. So that becomes a learning wallet that follows you forever through your whole learning journey of your life, that you can share with everyone. So it's super exciting.
As you're saying that, like, a couple of things come to mind. First is how education is changing regardless of whether IPFS is here or not. And I'm thinking of gaining entry into universities using projects, like in a project portfolio. We talked about that in previous episodes. So that's one place where you have all your work, at least all your digital work. And if your work is not digital, it can be digitized, right? These days, there's no shortage of methods to get everything in cyberspace. So you've got all this work on the internet somewhere. Look, you can use IPFS, and the fact that you use IPFS means that it is secure on the internet, regardless of which application layer you're using on top of it.
That's
Then another thing I was thinking is, like, at least in our generation, right, pretty much we were kids before the web came along, and Web 2.0 eventually. I really only have a few scraps of work that I did when I was 10 years old. Almost nothing left. Like, it's all distance memory. Almost nothing left. But what you're saying is that this technology will allow pretty much kids to record everything that they've ever done from the moment they were able to get on a computer.
Record it and own it 100%.
And own it.
Yeah.
And the network knows who the owner is.
It's so exciting. So a good example, I'll share this with you. This is, I'm super excited about this one. There's basically, we had some students last week building sustainable housing using Tinkercad, and they've made some amazing stuff, printed them out, all the rest of it.
Wow.
But what this means is these STL files that we saved, see if I got the other one, there's somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, you kind of get the idea from the pictures, but these files here, potentially, if the kids wanted to down the track, because we've uploaded the STL files to RocketShoes, they can get them back and they can do something like this and actually live in that house that they made in primary school.
Yes, look at that. A robot building a house.
I think at the moment it's about about 2 Bitcoins to 3D print and live in a house. The kids who have just made those sustainable houses
Your house has to be circular.
Yeah, but that tech's getting cheaper and better like every day. So literally, those kids who've made their own houses, they could live in them in the not too distant future.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about, I guess the practical implications and opportunities for a teacher using either RocketShoes or something like RocketShoes? I think the idea here is data ownership, blockchain, and the network being aware of the work and the owner of the work, and preserving it into the future. Like some of the opportunities here for teachers.
Yeah, I think there's a fair few. So if you look at probably the one that springs to mind first is the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation out of Europe. Now that legislation does expand to Australia because we have a lot of international students here, and pretty much every LMS, if not all of them, haven't really thought about it at all. So basically, what it means for maybe not so much a classroom teacher at the moment, but for their students going into the future, the LMS that they're using, so say they're using, you mentioned Blackboard before, or if they're using Google Classroom or Edmodo or something like that, if you plug RocketShoes in as the storage layer instead of it going over to servers overseas, then you're compliant with the GDPR, and it also means that the students have ownership as well. So there's a lot of implications in terms of the storage layer. I think for the classroom level, I think it means it's a good learning tool. So looking at where your data is going in particular. So there's a app that we're using at the moment that we're beta testing with the kids here called Textile. And Textile is essentially, if you've ever used Instagram before, it's essentially that, but on IPFS and on the blockchain. And
so what does it do?
So you have threads, and so it's just for photos. You take your photos, you share your photos with your friends, but you have ownership over that content, so you can revoke it at any time. So if you put that out to a classroom setting, you can have students taking photos, sharing work with a teacher, but then they can revoke that when they want to, when they move on to another school. So really, it's from a student perspective, it's super important, but if you think of it from a teacher perspective, there's a lot, and this goes right from K through to higher ed. There's no system at the moment where teachers can create content, so flipped learning, where you're creating a video and you want to share it with your students. At the moment, there's no way of indexing that. So you have stuff in little bits and pieces all over the place on YouTube, maybe on Vimeo, maybe on whatever else. and it all gets lost. It all gets lost, and there's no way of finding who does what. Even if you have an LMS, it's still all over the place. What RocketShoes allows for, and what IPFS allows for, is to hash all that content. You can see who it belongs to and search it, and it becomes highly searchable, and nothing gets lost. So the implications for that are absolutely huge when you think of both student-created content and then teacher-created content that they can find again in 6 months' time. You're like, what was that thing I did? No idea where it is, or like where it's gone. Like, that's going to become a thing of the past.
I guess, are there tools to provide all this functionality at the moment, or?
Yeah, so we're actually working on teacher tools at the moment, and we've got a really good development team behind the project. So basically,
is your development still in Australia?
Yeah.
For now.
Knock on wood, yeah, I hope so.
Have you implemented backdoors?
Yeah, no, we haven't, but it's exactly right. Well, and that's something that I think we need to really address as well. We've actually got, just looking at my calendar, we've got a meetup on Monday talking to a whole bunch of developers that are all coming into Stone and Chalk and from the blockchain center and everything to discuss that specifically, because I think somebody needs to take some action with that. But basically, with RocketShoes, we're broken down into milestones, and we've been funded through the Nem community.
Oh yeah, could you tell us about Nem, because I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So basically, what they do, instead of traditional sort of VC funding or grants or the usual ways that startups get funded with, borrowing money and all that sort of thing. What Nem do is actually fund projects based on community votes. So yeah, so this is actually my website, so Nem.Education. So this is using another aspect of one of the things you can do with Nem. But just going back to the votes or the community setup first for I can actually share it. Hang on a second.
Yep, you can take control.
Nem, fund. Sorry, hang on.
Are we just retrieving a document from the web?
Let's see, this is it. So it actually had, is that coming up?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically for RocketShoes, we were funded by the community. So if you imagine like hundreds of people or thousands of people saying, yes, we like this project, we want it to go ahead, then they fund it within cryptocurrency. So we got funded in what's called ZEM. So ZEM is a crypto that's on the Nem blockchain. Nem stands for New Economy Movement. But these are all the different startups that have been funded recently. RocketShoes isn't listed there for some reason, but probably these are all newer than ours. But we're basically gone through the process of being funded by the community, and what that means is they vote. So you have a thing called proof of importance, which is a little bit different to how the Bitcoin consensus algorithms work, but it basically means that people who are actually using the platform get more of a say, and you need X amount of POI, proof of importance, to get your startup funded. And we got that. So we got that for at the start of the year, and or sort of towards the start of the year.
Right.
And they basically, the community reviews your white paper and goes through the whole process of what you're actually going to build out, and then they fund it. So we're kind of starting milestone 2. We just finished milestone 1, so I've already got students using the platform, and the community basically looks at it and sees if you're doing what you say you're doing, and they keep funding to it.
If I understood right, so what Nem is something similar to Kickstarter, right? So crowdfunding,
Well, that's
projects?
one aspect of it. So that's just
Yeah.
one thing that the community does, but it's a whole ecosystem of well, it's a cryptocurrency that and a blockchain, but a whole ecosystem of blockchain things that you can do with that. So one of the other things that I'm working on at the moment is Nem.Education, and so basically this is consensus of content, so student voice on the blockchain. So if you've ever done something like a Survey Monkey or something like that before, they're pretty good, but you can't really trust the data because it's on a centralized server. And basically that means like if you're trying to get authentic data on a vote, something like a vote, or something like a consensus, you can't trust something like that.
Could have a backdoor.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
data on the central server could be tampered with.
Exactly right. And you can't really trust that the end person voting is the person they say they are, or as you can.
Of course, yeah, they can hide alter their identity, you know, on the internet in a way. On the internet is bipolar. I find if you're really careful, you can be anyone you want to be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the more you use it, the harder it is to hide who you are. That's like it's totally transparent.
That's a good point. Yeah. But with this, anyway, so we've got consensus of content in every school term. So this is something that everyone can be involved with if they want to. So any schools you're connected with, if they want to learn about blockchain technology, they can join up on here, and it's an ageless space. So I say that because I think teachers should be lifelong learners as well as students. So I want everyone to be able to use the platform and learn as much as possible. But basically, we're flipping the idea on its head of that top-down approach of you need to learn this now to progress to the next thing. Like, I think that's kind of going out the window. So we're using the Nem blockchain. So you can see on here, there's like poll addresses for, so like Genesis vote, blockchain technology modules. That was the last vote that went through. So we've actually got a module built on that. And now we've got another module vote, which students and teachers can all vote on. So whatever they want to learn, they can vote on that, and then it gets built out. But then the really cool thing is, if that content was useful, people can vote on that as well. So, you know, when you go to study at university, and there's a lot of degrees that, you know, you have X amount of content that was really good, and then a bunch that was like, I'm never going to use that again, ever. But you never get a say in how that works.
No, you can signal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
be able to.
So this is an educational resource, as you said, ageless. Would you recommend our listeners to join us? And
yeah, for sure. I mean, open to anyone, and I think the more of a community that we can build around learning about this sort of technology, I think the better we'll all be, because it's. I've been thinking for the last couple of years on how you replicate what's happening at Verona Park and what students are learning here, but do that for everyone in an ageless manner, because there's so many people who have no idea of what's going on at the moment. You can see that with the encryption bill that's just gone through. But I think this is a solution to that. So if you look at IBM's knowledge doubling curve, I think we might have talked about this last time, but so we'll bring it up. Basically, there's an image for it.
An inflection point.
Yeah, so we're coming up to, this isn't the best one, but we're coming up to 2020, where knowledge is going to double every 11 or 12 hours. At the moment, I think we're at every 11 months. But once we hit that mark of 12 hours, it's going to be exponential from there. And that's not just data, that's knowledge.
Yeah, I wanted to differentiate on that, because obviously we all know how many new cat and dog videos and prank videos come on YouTube every second, right? Probably tripling every second. I wouldn't call that knowledge, though. I'd call that
data
noise. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're talking about actual knowledge.
Yeah.
No, I've got a PhD in knowledge management. Not many people know.
There you go.
And yeah, and it took me a couple of years to figure out now what is knowledge. I almost said, what the hell is knowledge? Maybe I can beep it out. What is knowledge, right? And it's a very difficult question to answer. And eventually I came up with a simple definition, because if it's complicated, nobody will care. So I defined knowledge as a solution to problems. So you got a problem. In order to solve the problem, you need knowledge that will provide things such as the know-how and the details of the steps that are involved. And I did that because I was working with knowledge-based systems back then, and knowledge bases, and you need a definition. So is that the kind of knowledge that IBM here predicts, that we'll be able to know how to do more stuff, and we'll be able to solve problems at an accelerating rate, to the extent that every 12 hours we'll know how to do more stuff than solve as many problems and know how to do as many new things as we did in the previous 12 hours? Because it's mind-boggling.
Right. It really is mind-blowing. But it also means that we need to learn how to unlearn and learn again, because rapidly, so this is how like that top-down sort of hierarchical education system isn't going to work anymore, because you can't, at the moment, it's kind of like read the dictionary before you want to go and write something. It's like, okay, well, what happens when the dictionary is changing every 12 hours?
There's like 150,000 new words in it from the last 12 hours. And that dictionary has got like 50 million words because of the new things that we discover constantly.
That's right. That's right.
The paper doesn't cut it anymore.
They kind of talk about it in terms of a problem. Actually, Buckminster Fuller talks about it in depth as well, and he's going all the way back. But I don't see it as a problem. I think it's kind of exciting, and I think
absolutely
really cool things that are going to come out of that. And particularly in education, I think it's going to be awesome for students. Like you can, like the old model of sort of rote learning of doing your times tables, like that's
it's pointless, isn't it? Like I think the most important years for a teacher are the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 years of a student's life in school, where they learn how to read, write, and calculate. Because from that point onwards, it's almost pointless to teach anything. You need to provide some kind of meta teaching infrastructure, where by that I mean expose students with a bit of guidance to all these amazing developments and opportunities. Allow them to make their own explorations.
That's right.
I realized that, because of those statistics and the reality of where knowledge is going in this century, all technologies and ways of doing things like IP, internet protocol, right? Not good enough anymore. What we thought a few years ago that was quite awesome when we came to sharing files, large files on the web, not good enough anymore. That's why IPFS comes in. So we got a new, and the also like in competing technologies and the blockchain, which provide an infrastructure that can allow us to grow at that exponential rhythm when it comes to creating and accumulating knowledge. But when it comes back to teachers, I guess, wow, that's amazing. It's like, how can possibly a teacher be replaced by a robot when we talked about this in previous episodes, where a teacher has got so much more to teach these days, and so much more guidance to provide, that it's a job that never ends, and themselves need to be, or ourselves, I should say, need to be basically feeling like students constantly. So there's the distinction between teachers and students is also almost extinct at this point. It's a bit more experience.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I think if you're not excited about learning, and if you're not a lifelong learner, what's the point? Like, you may as well go and do something else. Because I think that if you're interested in learning the same way the students are, then doesn't, it's not even like work. Like you're just learning with them all the time. Like it's a symbiotic thing.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting statistic. I was reading a newspaper yesterday. I rarely do that, but I happened to read a newspaper, and it was talking about France, how France has got about 9% unemployment right now, which it is a relatively high percentage of people unemployed compared to places like Australia. But the interesting bit in it was not so much the 9%, was that in France, there's a lot of new job openings every year. That could actually absorb all of those unemployed people. So like something like 400,000 new jobs per year created, or actually every 6 months. So I can't remember the details, but there's a lot of new jobs created. But those jobs require particular skills that the 9% of unemployed people don't have. So, for example, a lot of programmers and IT-related skills, machine operators as well. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that a machine operator is somebody that pulls a lever and makes a excavator move, but no, like you actually need to have some pretty decent mathematics skills, even programming. You need to program a machine. You need to understand how networks work to operate these machines in modern factories, and those are the kinds of jobs that are opening up.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think networking in particular is super important, and there's not enough emphasis on it. So we've actually had a group of cybersecurity graduates doing placement here at Orana. So we had about 12, I think, over the last term, actually working with the students here. So we built that was the other thing. So we finished our STEAM Center, which is really cool, or STEM Center, whatever you want to call it. But I think we talked about it last time, where we got funding through BTC, and the kids got to vote on what hardware goes in there.
Yes.
And built it out of shipping containers. So we finished that, and these cybersecurity students came in the nick of time. To be honest, they really helped out. So they helped us build a network engineering space in one of the containers. So we have a Cisco container. And the kids building their own networks and packet tracer, like doing it virtually, and then or logical networks, and then building them in a lab in real life with hardware donated by a local TAFE. So it's really cool, really amazing. So I think that's super important as well. Like from a young age, being able to think about how computers talk to each other. That's something that's not taught, I don't think, enough.
Internet of Things, right?
Yeah.
What IBM was saying in the chart you showed earlier. So Internet of Things is also contributing a lot to that expansion of knowledge creation and acquisition.
That's right.
It's all about networks now, machines talking to other machines. You need to be on top of this.
Yeah, that's right.
Any part of life is now going to be affected by all of these technologies merging.
Well, it's fascinating. Like there's a bit of a debate going on at the moment in the blockchain space, just kind of at the higher levels, I suppose. So if you look at Dan Larimer and like his school of thought, and Vitalik Buterin. So Vitalik, he invented Ethereum.
Yes.
And Dan Larimer has invented a bunch of really cool blockchain techs, including Steam. But what's his latest one? EOS. So EOS is sort of competing with Ethereum. And to break it down really simply, like Vitalik sort of sees artificial intelligence running consensus algorithms to basically run everything for us. And
so we can go on a holiday, finally.
Yeah. But Dan Larimer sort of sees it as, no, you need to put people in charge of that and incentivize people to, vote, sort of thing. So it's really interesting to see that duality sort of playing out, because it's like it's kind of like that old left-right paradigm that people used to go on about. It's kind of morphed into this like AI versus people, and which way are we going to go? So it's fascinating.
It's a next evolution of human civilization, I guess. Like I'm watching this documentary on SBS about the history of Europe, and it's showing the milestones in European development, like ancient Athens, when the citizens of Athens had a bit of time to think about science, technology, society to build the democracy of Athens. And you've got Renaissance, due to the accumulation of wealth in Europe. A lot of it was obviously because of slaves in Africa and bringing in spices from Asia and sugar from America and so on. So there's a lot of negative aspects in this story, but the wealth that was created gave rise to Renaissance and amazing works of art, and the Reformation, and you had the new states with actual human rights being constructed and developed in Europe at that time, and that continued every time that you had that sense of abundance, that we've got the ability now to do things because we don't have to be tied up to just survive. You have the next step in evolution of humanity. And I get the feeling that all these technologies start to get us to that point where we have amazing tools that give a lot of power, and increasingly in the world you've got more resources, like SpaceX, for example, starting asteroids where we can have abundant precious elements for electronics, for batteries, efficient batteries for energy production and so on. So is it the feeling that you get, like when you see your students, like compare your students to when you were a student in our generation, basically the things that we learned, the kind of things that our mind was occupied with as we were students, compared to what you see your students are creating 3D versions of the house that they're going to automatically build in the future, and that is stored in a memory that will never fade as long as there is a planet, and then we can colonize other planets, and then the Interplanetary File System is going to become Galactic File System, GSFS maybe. Like, what's your feeling on this?
No, it's definitely. I think that's huge. Since like I was a kid, like when I was 10, I was a blithering idiot compared to these kids. I knew nothing.
Yeah, so I'd sit in the corner and do nothing for hours. I thought it's normal.
I was playing like Mario Brothers, but I wasn't really.
Yes.
Like the higher order thought these kids are thinking now is just mind blowing. But it's all thanks to the internet and being connected. It kind of annoys me when you see these schools that are like banning technology and blocking the internet. It's like, really? That's how you learn? Like oh God, there's my phone going out there, but I'll better go in a second, I think, but that's all right. The other thing I wanted to announce, and this sort of goes into that, is we had a current affair out last Friday, and basically we're going to go one-to-one smartphones for next year. So it's really cool. So, and it kind of flies in the face a little bit of these schools that are saying, phones are bad, distraction tools, blah, 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 blah. But what it means is, we're not just doing it for the sake of it, we're doing it purposely. So there's equity of access, because not every student can afford the latest MacBook Pro that these private schools can afford. So families can now get a $98 or $89 Android device and be connected, and just as connected as their peers, but we're going to do it on a tiered thing. So like a cheap Android device, like mid-range up to an iPhone, and the kids can sort of choose what they want. So
the kids will be given a smartphone by the school to be able to participate in like the digital education.
That's right. So
create content, consume content.
So the creating content's huge, but what happens with RocketShoes and so Textile, for example, so they're called dApps, decentralized apps. Basically, they allow you to create a distributed network of phones. So every phone in the network becomes a node in the network. So it becomes super efficient. So the more phones you have in the school, the more your data gets to you as quickly as possible. So we're creating a distributed network within the school. But it also allows us to create an augmented reality learning space throughout the school. So every device has AR, so you can create triggers. So the whole school is going to become a magical AR learning space. So it's multifaceted. Like we're not just going, we're getting phones for the sake of it. Like it's purpose driven, and it's going to solve a lot of problems that I think are in education at the moment, like without having a device with you. And the other point is ethics. So it's at the moment, and this is something people don't really think about from a student's perspective. At the moment, you have a lot of, like all of us. So I've got a phone in my pocket now. You probably do too. Everyone who's an adult has a phone in their pocket, and we use it to learn all the time. So we pull it up. What was that thing that we wanted to do? And we look it up. But we do that in front of kids, and we're basically saying to them, well, we're allowed to learn like this, but you're not. Like, we're better than you, sort of thing. And it's not really fair, because it's a 24/7 learning device that you can have in your pocket. So that's where we're sort of coming at it from. And we've got a new internet connection, or a fiber optics coming across the school to support it. And yeah, it's all happening next year. So I'm stoked. So we'll have to do another podcast to when we actually get it all up and running.
Definitely, we've got to get this done again. Like, you've got, as I said before we started, you've got so many developments to tell us about that. I feel that I've been sleeping since the last time we spoke. Obviously, I've been doing other things, but like, this is super important, and I feel I've been sleeping on this particular topic. So it's good to catch up again. Well, how about we wrap it up here? And in conclusion, I'd like to ask you to summarize all of the amazing things that you discussed, that we discussed, and from the teacher's point of view, what should they pay attention to? What should they take home and perhaps do a little bit of work after listening to this podcast? How do they prepare for all this?
I think probably the best thing to do is jump onto Nem.Education, and you can sign up there, and you can jump into some blockchain modules and have your say in what you want to learn. The other thing I would suggest, or you can go to my website as well, kdnolan.com, and I've got everything on there sort of listed. That's probably the best place to start.
Yep.
The RocketShoes is still in development, so we're developing specifically for Verana, but definitely worth reading through the white paper. We've got some videos on the website that kind of explain it as well. And what was the other thing we were talking about? And the IPFS white paper.
Yes.
That's really worth reading through, because there's some stuff online that kind of breaks it down, but if you read the white paper and then do a little bit of research, take an hour just to go through it, it'll really expand your mind into what's possible. And the other thing was, what else did we talk about?
Register in Nem.Education.
Yeah, register there, and we'll talk about the one-time program next time.
Yeah. And I'd say check out the new bill that makes Australian internet worse than North Korean or Chinese. Remember the back doors. Great. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Kieran. It was really enlightening. Gee, what an hour. I've learned so much. Are you going to make me very busy for the next couple of days?
Oh, good.
Trying to finish my course. I've got a new course on KiCad and PCB design software, but I'm going to take a bit of time to look into all that.
Awesome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Kieran. Talk soon.
Bye.